Hey, little mama, you've heard about the Moms Like Us Academy, right? I talk about it all the time. But have you ever wondered, what is this all about? Well, you know what? Every month we have master classes, and then we have challenges or make it happen. And then we have a Q&A live with me, or you can send it in and I'll answer you DMing you. And in the fourth week in the Moms Like Us Academy, you get some kind of a surprise for me. It might be something in the mail, it might be a recipe, but whatever it is, it's going to take the topic of the month and make it real for you. And that's what the Moms Like Us Academy happens inside of it. But not only that, you get real mentoring. You get real mentoring in your mothering to move you forward in a way that you actually get the results you want. I mean, the results that you've always wanted. And so instead of just a 3-point Pinterest or a really quick podcast, which you know I love, you're going to get real mentoring from Mona the Mom Mentor and others that are teaching masterclasses. Okay, so right now, I'm going to give you a little sneak peek and a taste of some of the masterclasses that are taking place in our academy. So be on the lookout. We're going to be opening it real soon. Let's get to our show. Bye for now. Welcome to the Moms Like Us Academy. This is our class on sexuality, and I am so excited today. Y'all, you just have no idea all the good things we're going to learn. I have a special guest with me. This is Nancy. Nancy Houston is a sex therapist. She's a licensed counselor. She is an adjunct. That's a hard word to say.
It is.
I guess you have to be like a college person to be able to say that, which it's at a college at
Concordia.
Thank you. I couldn't say it this morning either when I went on to think. I guess it's my Texas tongue getting mixed up with my Michigan accent.
There you go. I do the same thing with my Oregon,
Sometimes it just won't roll. Okay, and then Nancy has been married for over 40 years. She has 4 married sons and 8 grandchildren. This is very special to me. You are the director for the John Townsend Leadership Program in New York City and in the Dallas area. John Townsend and some other people, but his book Boundaries literally changed my life.
Yeah,
it literally changed my life. Yeah. So that was really exciting. And you were a Gateway pastor. And that's where I was first introduced to you in the great classes that you offered there at Gateway. And I taught them in our home. And then we you've done, I didn't know this, that you were the founder of the Intimate Life Department at Gateway. Yeah. I didn't know that. Girl, you have been a busy, busy lady. I love the fact that you have taken your life, and because we're Moms Like Us, we teach moms, as you all know, that we help moms thrive in their mothering and their marriages and not lose themselves, to still use their gifts and talents, but still fulfill their roles as wife and mother and curator of their home. And Nancy actually has done a really amazing job doing that. And someday I want to ask you how you did all that. But today we're going to talk sex, Nancy. I don't really know anything else. I had Cheryl Scruggs on as a class. We interviewed her we did a class last week, and we were talking about some stuff, and we're like, we just got to have Nancy talk about that next week.
She's great. She's a good friend.
Yeah, she's a good friend to me too. And Cheryl and I go back a long time. And so when we get to talking, I'm like, Cheryl, we're going to have to clip 3/4 of this thing out. But anyways, in a world of sexual chaos and confusion, we need healthy dialogue. I wrote that down because I think that is one of the most important things that you bring to this, Nancy. And you bring it in such a compassionate, kind way. Y'all, get ready and get your paper out and your little pens, because you are going to write down a ton of stuff that Nancy's going to share with us. Nancy, tell us a little bit more, fill in the blanks that I left out about your life and all that.
Okay.
Oh, I've got the book. We just said, this is the book. Yeah. This is the book, but there's lots of other things that Nancy has to offer. But this is the book we're talking about today. And I think, Nancy, it's one of your finest works, honestly.
Yeah. Thank you.
when I got it, I thought, okay, I don't know, maybe I need to take the cover off while I'm reading it on the plane, like, I don't know, right? And so, but I read it as soon as it came out. But I took it on the plane this past week. Like, I'm going to take off the cover. I'm such a Texas girl. But I think it's one of your finest works because it actually isn't just about sex. It's about healthy sexuality and intimacy, and your stories in it are so real without being like too shocking. And you brought some terminology to the forefront that I think is changing the way I will be ministering to the women that I'm ministering to. So tell us a little bit about why you wrote the book and any other thing else that I've put in, and we'll get you introduced and then we'll get into the meat.
Okay. Well, oh my goodness, where do I start? So why did I write this book? God gave me, I think, his heart for the topic of human sexuality like decades ago. First of all, I had to work through some of my own wounded places.
Mm-hmm.
I'd grown up with some sexual trauma and then experienced a sexual assault in high school. So I just had some of my own stuff to work through. And God was so sweet because in my 30s, that was really my decade of working through a lot of that trauma. And then when I got through it, God started speaking to me about finishing my bachelor's degree, getting a master's degree, becoming a therapist. And then as soon as I became a therapist, my office started filling with people who had a lot of sexual issues. And so one night after I'd had like 8 clients, I sat on my couch and said, okay, Lord, what are you doing? What's going on here? Why?
I'm Nancy. Why am I having all these people talk to me about sex?
How about, and I'm like, is this something you're calling me to? And I felt like he said yes. And I'm like, are you sure like Susan down the hallway wouldn't be better at this and me? I mean, really, is this, to talk to people about their sexuality and to help them seemed a little overwhelming. But I said, okay, well, if this is what we're doing, then I want training because I want to do it well. And so like a few weeks later, I ran into a Christian sex therapist who just happened to be part of an institute where they were training Christian therapists to become sex therapists.
Perfect.
So I signed up and got my certification as a sex therapist. And, it wasn't easy by any means, but I know that God kept kind of pushing me in that direction. So after I left Gateway 4 years ago, and when I left Gateway, I'd written a marriage book to go along with the marriage course I had. And so...
Well, tell them about that too.
Well, okay. So when I was at Gateway, I wrote a course called Marriage Revolution and taught that for several semesters and for 4 years, and loved it, loved the interaction with the people. So I had part of a book, and John Townsend said, well, then you need an agent. So I got an agent, sent the book to the agent. He sent it to a publisher. The publisher came back and said, we just published a big marriage book, but you had 2 chapters in there on sexuality. Would you write a book on sex? So I'm like, okay, because I really felt like that was really the book I was supposed to write.
Oh, wow.
And so the publisher, I got this deal with the publisher and just would pray and sit down in my chair and put music in my ears and just start writing. I didn't even know where I was going to start, but I felt like just the Lord wrote this book through me. And I love what you said because it is meant to be so much more than about sexuality. It's about how we do relationships, how we create dialogues around the topic or about sexuality. Because if we can talk about sex, I think we can talk about anything.
Agreed.
And I think sex is so important because, I think human sexuality is a big reflection of God himself because God is part mystery. And, the Apostle Paul said that sex is more than skin on skin. It's a spiritual mystery, much like God himself is. And so, that's why I wrote the book. And to help people, just like, gosh, nobody has healthy dialogues around human sexuality. We hear a lot of don't, especially if you're female. Don't. Save it for sex is dirty. Save it for the one you love. That never made sense to me. You know, I'd get young brides in my office and like, gosh, I was told that sex is bad, and now I'm married and I can't find the on switch. And I was told if I waited, it would be paradise and it would be wonderful, and it's not wonderful. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. These are more like skills that need to be learned, and that's why we've got to talk about it. And sexuality is complex, and so the more just healthy dialogues, quit making it weird, make it normal. We're all sexual creatures, so that's why I
I
hold it.
love that in the book you talked about a little boy. I can't remember his name, but he was 6 years old, and I mean, he had to learn where his feelings were at.
Yeah.
And because we're talking to moms, I want you girls to know that yes, this is a topic about sexuality today, and even your own healthy sexuality and finding a place for that. But teaching your children to feel feelings and to identify feelings is one of the things that will set them up for good, healthy sexuality. Is that true, Nancy?
It's so true. One of my good friends who has little kids says, "Oh my gosh, this was like a parenting book for me." Because I do try to teach a lot of emotional intelligence in this book. I've also had therapists say, boy, this book teaches me how to run a group better. Or just, you know, other people who do some group work or lead groups or Bible studies or women's groups, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And really, and just mentoring from the perspective of, of what I do. You know, it used to be that I would be invited to speak, and I would go and I would think, oh, they just want something fluffy. They really want to sit and talk to their friends, and they just want to be entertained a little bit before they can do the real thing of visiting, because they're moms and they don't get away from their kids very often. And then I would get to the Q&A, and they would ask me such hard questions.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, I just gave you 45 minutes of fluff and you really wanted something deep. And I think that that's what I'm seeing in this culture of, like, the women that I have that are 28 to 45, and you girls can chime in with your questions at any time, and then we'll take them later for Nancy. It won't interrupt us at all if you're clicking and asking us questions in the chat. But I've noticed that they are used to asking questions. They're used to saying, I wonder if, and they Google it. But the problem is that they want real flesh and blood women to give them answers, because they want to know that the answers that they're getting, they can trust, because Google's never had kids. And like I say, Pinterest perfect isn't possible. So they need real flesh and blood women like me and Nancy to come and say, hey, there's a truth here, and I made these mistakes, and there are these pitfalls, and it'd be so great if you didn't have to fall in them. So let me help you. And this is the way Nancy has approached this book. And it is the way she approaches everything that I've seen her do. And I think that I hate to keep going on and on about the book, but it's such an easy read, and there's so much good stuff in it to learn. But Nancy, I talk a lot about biblical womanhood, which is my topic of expertise. And I noticed in there that you said something that really backed up what I've been teaching the women in the Mom Academy. And we talk about Adam and Eve and the genesis of gender a lot. I loved it when you said, number one, Eve, the serpent placed doubt in a woman, and every woman has been marked by doubt ever since. And Adam was passive, and passivity paralyzes a man and leaves him feeling inadequate, feeling less than, and in its extremes, he feels like a loser. That is a powerful part of the very start of this book. You want to address that a little more?
Well, boy, I do think, you know, because of the fall, there are some marks that have been left on us, and why we need so much support from one another to not start listening to those voices of, well, I'm not enough, I'm inadequate. Who would really want to love me? Um, I'm not good enough. If people really knew me, they wouldn't like me. All these things doubt inside of us and make us wonder and question ourselves, and then fall into these relational pits that where couples just struggle so hard with each other. Marriage isn't easy, right? Marriage isn't easy. Relationships aren't easy. And then you add sexuality into that, things can get really complex and hard. And so I just want to normalize that from the beginning of time, things we've been really challenged as human beings. And how can we be more supportive of each other and create more dialogues where people are realizing I'm not alone, I'm not a freak, there's not something wrong with me, that we women struggle with doubt and questioning ourselves, and men can struggle with feeling passive and not knowing what to do. So we need to support each other way more, is what I think we all need. Way more support.
Yeah, and this book really helps us understand that and opens up, like you said, the dialogue. You also said, um, this was yeah, like duh, but okay. You said the reason sex is so hurtful is because it's so powerful. Our sexual histories shape us. It's intended to ground and root us in God's love. And that for me was a little hard because I was like, well, I wasn't a believer and when I got married. And so the thought that God was like in my bedroom was like, oops, I don't know if I can handle that. So I wasn't used to having God even in my life, much less in my sexuality. And so back when we were first married and I started learning the truth about God's word, it was interesting to allow Jesus into our sex life. And through some things that had happened to me, I had to learn to have him literally help me through the whole thing. And I think that that is one of the things that you talk about is like this trauma part of it. You said that there's wholeness in sexuality. And the problem is that we hold secrets. We have a family of origin with dysfunction. You want to talk about either one of those?
So I really do believe that we're all shaped sexually, and that oftentimes sex gets stuck where it gets started. And so, kids can be shamed for playing doctor, for being inquisitive about sexuality. And I always tell moms, it's like your kids aren't being erotic. Your children are curious. And when children are sexually curious, it's a signal to mommy and daddy that it's time to really start sexually educating your children. And nowadays, I really believe that sexually educating your children is as important as teaching them how to read. Like we wouldn't consider sending our children out in the world not knowing how to read or being illiterate, would we? And I don't think we should send our children out into this world being illiterate about human sexuality, because it's all around them. It's one click away on their computer. They can innocently be Googling something for a school assignment and porn sites pop up. And then our children are exposed to, perverted adult sexuality that isn't a picture of what God wants. And it can be scary, and it can be exciting, and it can create a lot of curiosity. And my goodness, so many of the people I have worked with that have adult sexual issues, it started when they were like 7 years old, walking home from school and saw a Penthouse magazine in a dumpster. Or nowadays kids, they don't need to do that. They've got their computers and Xboxes and everything at home at instant disposal, and they can get exposed to so much stuff. And I think we've got to be having these dialogues with our children early and often. And parents,
So it's more, so what you're saying is it's more than just blocks and trying to shelter them from it. At this point, we have to have discussions and it's just part of our world. And the girls that are in my tribe, literally the Moms Like Us community, we get it. We're moms like us and we are trying desperately to make sure that we are preparing our children in this world where the bathrooms and the stuff and the education and the books and everything that's coming out with the transgender and all of that. You did talk about attachment, and this is something that moms would can add to their parenting, and how this celebrating your gender, your male and your female.
yeah, I believe that our first sexual talk with our child starts at birth. when we start, parents always ask, when should I start, when should I have the talk? And I'm like, please don't ever have the talk. Have a million little talks.
I love that.
And when they're born, celebrate. Look at God made you a little boy. You are so precious and beautiful. And I'm just celebrating that God gave us a son, and you're going to grow up and be a man someday. And you just start speaking these things over your sons and your daughters. And I think those are our first sex talks. We start celebrating their gender, you know?
And isn't it funny? We didn't even use the word gender 10 years ago.
Oh, I know. I know.
When I wrote my second book, the publisher that I was going with, they're like, oh, we don't want to use the word gender. Nobody will know what that is. I'm like, but it matches generation gender. Like it matches.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. Yeah, you're right.
Then you talking about old time ago,
Yeah.
you said, and I love this. I don't love it, but I think it's accurate. The plague of the 21st century is sexual addiction.
Oh my goodness. Is it ever?
I
Right?
think this is where we're going to land, and we're going to use the rest of our time. I want you to address the word masturbation. Just makes people like inhale and make small sounds like like that.
Yeah.
And I love the new term that you gave, and it's like helping me so much in the discussions I need to have with people. I love the word auto sex.
Yeah.
I mean, it is just so much more. It's more accurate,
Yeah.
and it kind of takes away the stigma, and it raises someone's question to go, what's that? And then when you tell them, then they're like, oh, I know what that is.
Yeah. Yes.
So it like the word masturbation almost brings like a shame immediately as soon as you say it. And so I think that did you plan on doing that on purpose?
Well, I'm always all about let's de-shame this topic,
Yes. Well, that certainly helps.
right? Because our shame levels here about sexuality, we're never going to have great conversations about it because shame inhibits and stops all the dialogue. It even stops. Most of the reason parents don't talk to their kids about sex is because they have high shame levels. And they're like, well, I didn't do it right. So who am I to talk to my children about this? And I'm like, you know what? We just need to let our shame go, right? So that we can work through our own personal history. Because honestly, they say the best moms are those who can coherently tell their stories. So it doesn't matter how bad, how traumatic your story is, if you can tell your story, you're going to be a great parent, right? And
That's
so
so true.
I'm all about like, let's de-shame this. Let's have honest, real conversations about masturbation, about sexual trauma, about porn, about addictions, about oral sex, about anal sex, about any kind of sex that people want to talk to me about. I'm like, let's talk about it. Because that's the only way we're going to heal and do things differently.
I live my life telling my children and the women that I mentor, um, the devil wants you to be a victim. He wants you to suffer in silence and in darkness. And we are not victims. We are not victims, and we have a path out, and everything is redeemable. Everything is redeemable.
Totally.
And doing the hard work of healing, I'm writing down, I'm looking at all my notes. My notes are so full. My book, I was going to go through my book, but I realized that would be impossible with all the highlighting. So I would like you to address, we've had lots of questions about, I'm worried that my husband's addicted to pornography. We only have sex once a month. He doesn't really want to talk to me anymore. Like these are some of the real hard questions that I've gotten from our moms that I know they would love for me to have you address.
Okay. I would love to address that with the women because you're right. It's a huge topic and it's so convenient. It's so in their faces. Um, so I think some things that I want to say to the women is a husband can really love his wife and have a porn problem. They are not mutually exclusive. If your husband has a porn problem, it's not because there's something wrong with you. Okay, I really want the women to hear that. Your husband can have a real porn problem, and it's not because there's something wrong with you. It's not because you aren't pretty enough, you aren't sexy enough. I've worked with so many wives, and they're like, well, maybe if I wash my hair more often. And I'm like, that's not why he has a porn problem, darling. I promise you. He has a porn problem because he has a problem. And the thing about porn that we women really need to understand, well, and females are now struggling with porn as well,
Yeah.
because females typically, culturally and socially, follow what males are doing sexually. We're usually about 20 years behind them, but females will follow their lead. And so, what I want everybody to understand is that sometimes porn can start as a moral problem. Now, it's not always that person's moral problem. Sometimes they're a little kid and they get exposed to adult sexuality, and they shouldn't have been, right? They need protection. But man, as available it is as it is, it's hard to even protect our children from all the pornified world we live in, right? So
Pornified world. Oh,
it's a porn.
what you are the term lady. Like, I'm writing all these out.
And so then it's so addictive, because what it does is it hits the reward center of the brain. And you have these lovely images of these very sexy men and women on the screen, and then you have a sexual release, and then you have hit your reward center, and you have these big releases of dopamine and oxytocin, and so that's what becomes addictive. And so then we have a brain problem, because then porn is rewiring the brain. And then these people who get addicted to porn, it's so weird, because you think that they would be wanting more sex with their spouse, but actually what happens is they actually get attached to these images. And so then they're just having auto sex, which is sex with yourself, and then they stop making love to their spouse. And then their spouse can feel really neglected. So I think the thing is, like, let's say there's a wife whose husband, she knows he's looking at porn. I think I would say, sit down with him and say, hey, honey, I love you and I'm for you. But I think that I think we have an issue here, and I don't want us to ignore the elephant in the room, because it's affecting you, it's hurting you, it's hurting me, it's hurting our marriage. And our marriage really matters to me. You matter to me. I want us to have a great marriage. I want us to have a great sex life. I want us to be connected to each other. And it's like we've got this big thing in between us, and we've got to address it. So I'm all about, if somebody's addicted to porn or really struggling with porn, that they get the treatment they need. And I am a huge supporter of, like, Celebrate Recovery. I love stuff like that, but I'm telling you, with sexual addiction, you need specific treatment, because it is a very specific problem. And thank God nowadays there are enough places around who are treating sexual addiction and porn issues. And so I say, get help, get help, get help.
Can you give them hope that you've seen people like get past it, and you've seen people have healthy, can you give them some encouragement? Because they talk about, addiction and, MRIs and the studies that show how bad it is, and we keep hearing how bad it is, and it's like we'll never get past it.
Yeah. So it's all highly treatable, which is a great part, but hoping it'll go away, praying it'll go away, that's that passivity. I mean, I'm all for praying and I'm all for hope, but I know couples who are like, well, we've been praying for 20 years, or my wife had an affair 20 years ago and we're not over it, or my husband had an affair 10 years ago and we're not over it. I'm like, of course you're not, because you didn't get the treatment and the support and the help you needed, right? These
Yeah.
things do not go away on their own. So we all have to stop hoping and pretending and praying that this is going to go away and it's going to get better. It typically doesn't. So there's the truth, and I just want to give you the truth.
Well, don't you think that that's the way God intended us to be able to have to rely on one another, so we wouldn't become this this auto life. So we would just always be, that's why your gifts and talents bless me and my gifts and talents bless you. And then our gifts and talents, we get blessed by our gifts and talents, but the purpose of them is to bless each other in the body. And yeah, he was kind of smart with that. So it is good that in this culture we can go and seek help and get help from people like Nancy and that are experts in that.
It's so
I
great.
love
When I was at Gateway, I started an affair recovery program, and
it.
then I started a group for men who are struggling with porn issues to get into a group setting, start talking about it. Let's make it safe. And I started a group for their wives because I'm like, man, people have these problems. Let's not keep them in the dark. Let's bring them into light.
In your book, again, girls, the book is Love and Sex. You have the guys group, and it goes through talking about the guys and what they were talking about to one another. So, again, I just can't recommend this book enough. I think it is so good. Like I've read every Christian sex book there is.
And
And all the girls are laughing, right? All my girls are laughing. Go ahead, type it in there. She probably has.
there's also a women's group. And
Yeah.
so, reading the book would be a great place to start an honest dialogue with your spouse. And I think reading the book would give you words and language and make it safe to talk about this kind of stuff, right? Because couples, part of becoming great lovers to another person is learning how to talk about sexuality. If we
Yeah.
don't talk about it, we're not really ever going to have a great sex life.
Right, so true. We're coming up on our last thing. If you girls have questions, you need to type them in. And again, it's so funny because the questions about sex, nobody wants to type it in because their name comes up, right?
Okay, yeah.
But I would like for you, I know something that they would like is like, what are some of the warning signals that your husband is into pornography? Is it the amount of times you have sex? Is it like, what are some of the warning signs that a wife, I know we don't usually know, women don't usually know, but what would be an indicator that maybe you needed to ask for help or you needed to get?
Yeah. Well, so I think it's always great when couples are checking in with each other. Like, how's the sexual part of your life, sweetheart? Like, what's happening in your world? And being a safe woman for him to open up to. You know, um, so many women like, wait, I need my husband to be up on his white horse, and I can't let him come down from there and let him just be human. We've got to let our husbands be human and let them struggle, and that we're not going to be intimidated by that, but we're going to be like, okay, I'm going to come alongside of you in that, you know
I
and
remember you teaching that in Love Revolution,
oh, really.
that we have a tendency to, we say we want them to be vulnerable, but we do not want them to fall apart because we do not want them off that horse.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
remember.
And so, then they feel like men have a warrior's relationship with emotional vulnerability. And so if they don't feel like they can be safe with you, then they are not going to be vulnerable with you. And true intimacy is all about vulnerability. And really learning how to make love to each other is about vulnerability. So, women, we kind of have this sixth sense, which we truly, truly, truly do. So if you think your husband has a porn problem, I again would just sit down with him and say, hey, babe, I think there's something going on, and I want to be a safe person for you to be able to open up to. And then I want us to get the help that we need. So let's talk about this. Let's pursue sexual health. Let's pursue having the greatest sex life that we can possibly have together. Let's pray about this, because here's the thing about God and sex. God is the creator of sexuality. He made male with the ability to have erections so he can make love to a woman. He gave females a vagina and breasts and curves to make us attractive. And, in scripture, it says that, may our breasts satisfy him all the days of his life. So God's the one who made us curvy and beautiful. And so I think that's exactly why we can invite God into the sexual parts of our lives, because he's the one who gave us hormones. He's the one who gave us sexual passion and desire. and a desire to be erotic with husband and wife, and it's all good. There's
Now
no,
there are, I have a lot of girls that say, I don't think he's addicted to porn. I know he's not having an affair, but we're not having sex.
yeah, right?
And they're, they're 30-year-old guys.
Yeah,
Like, is that, should they be concerned? Or,
yeah.
I always ask him, is he on medication? Because there are things that can cause that. But a 30-year-old guy that doesn't want to have sex more than once a month, what would you say?
I would first, some of my inclinations would be, is he highly stressed out? Does he feel super inadequate? Um, like, my goodness, sometimes I've known wives who, like, if they can't have an orgasm, then they get up and storm out of the bedroom, and they'll sit on the couch and go, "What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me?" And he's hearing, "What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me?" So he feels very inadequate to be sexual with her. Doesn't feel safe. He feels inadequate, right? So I would see what's going on stress level, because stress kills sex. How are you two really connecting with each other? Is he hearing something from you that you're not really saying, but it's what he's hearing? So I always think, hey, babe, what are you hearing when I say, like, for my husband and I, when we were young marrieds, I would sometimes look in my closet and say, I have nothing to wear. And he'd look in my closet and go, like, you have stuff to wear. And I'm like, oh, I just have nothing to wear. And you know what he would hear? He would hear, she thinks I'm a bad provider.
Yeah.
And so, men need a lot more appreciation. We women give each other appreciation. Like, I might be at the grocery store and I'll say to a woman, "Oh, I love your shoes. Oh, your hair looks great today. Oh, you're such a good mom." But men don't do that to each other. So men get very little appreciation. And so, just like, I came home from a business trip last night. My husband had made a salad and was marinating chicken and got me flowers. And I'm like, honey, you are the best man in the whole world. You are my hero. I am so lucky to come home to you. He used to not always do those things, but I learned that if I will appreciate even the smallest things, like, thank you for taking out the garbage, or thank you for giving the kids a bath, I appreciate you so much. I mean, I think we realize that our words have a lot of power, and we can build up our husband or we can tear him down. And so if he's not making love to you, I'd see, first what's going on health wise. Then is there some porn problems? Because, a lot of times porn will be a substitute. And if he's masturbating to porn, then, he's kind of taking care of himself. And so it's going to lower his sex drive with his wife. Is there something else going on? Is there a lot of anger in the marriage that's unresolved that you're not talking about? So make sure you resolve those things. Does he hate his work? Does he feel buried under the bills? And maybe saying, hey, babe, I see that you're working 3 jobs and you're exhausted. I want you to know you are doing such a great job and I appreciate you so much.
Yeah.
Kindness goes a long ways in a relationship. And then just say, hey, honey, I noticed that you haven't been initiating sex. Would you like me to initiate more? Or is there something going on here? I think just having those conversations. And, it's not like you just need them once in a while. I think conversations about sexuality need to be ongoing and a regular part of conversation.
And I think that using tools like this book, not making your man read this book, although it's a benefit if he would. But for me, like I said to Warren the other day, I said, hey, I saw this thing about, do you know your husband's flirting language? And he's like, oh, is that one of those tests that you take or those quizzes? And I'm like, well, it wasn't a quiz, but it was like, does your man like this? Or does he like this? Or does he like this? And he had an opinion. Like he knew how he liked me to flirt with him. And I thought, this is valuable. But it opened up the conversation. So I realized that like he wanted me to be semi-aggressive, but he wanted me to like hang back a little and allow him to come in. And then some men just want you to show up naked, So it was just like, that was interesting, but it was a conversation that we were able to have. And because we were so young and I was a virgin and he was a virgin, we didn't have anything. There doing anything. There was no one to talk to. Like, what the heck? I'm sure he had seen more than I had seen. But all we had was the joy of sex. And some nurse gave it to me. And we went back into the bedroom. We sat down on the bed. And we opened it up. I'm like, we're going to figure this out. Like, this is going to be great. But I mean, we were naive. And so.
But you know what? I think there's something so great about that, because I wish every couple would address their sex life like that. Because the truth is, even if your husband and you had had sex with other people, it's still, this is you and I, and how are we going to together figure out how to make love to each other through the stages of life? Because young marrieds is different than when you bring a baby home. And then when you have toddlers, and when you have teenagers, and then when you empty your nest, and then when you get older, you have to have these conversations all the time. And I think remaining really humble with each other, like, okay, how can we make love to each other now? Now that we're facing these struggles, how does this affect our sex life? What do we need to learn new now? You know, we're having this struggle or this. How are we going to figure this out together?
And then all the kids go away, and then you're like, whoa, we don't have to sneak around anymore. And then you know what happened? Y'all, you know me. You know Miss Mona. I'm like, what the heck? We don't have to sneak around anymore. And then like that we found out like that was part of the fun of sex. It's like we were still sneaking around. Like it's like we were still 14, sneaking around trying to get a kiss. And we had used that throughout our whole sex life, and now we didn't have to sneak around anymore. And then we're like, okay, what does this mean? And then when we realized what it mean was, then it opened up a whole new avenue of intimacy and fun in our lives. And so we got one more question, then I'm gonna let you go. If you had one thing that you could tell your younger self about sexuality with your husband or whatever, what would you tell her?
Just have a lot of fun together, and just see sex as, sort through your sexual past, which I did, but do that knowing that there's going to be so many sexual beautiful benefits from that. Like Ron and I are in our 60s, and
like us,
and we have this awesome fun sex life together, and I hope we will until we're 90. But I'm so glad that I worked through my sexual history, and I learned how to sort through, this was awful, this is sweet and good, right? Being with my husband is sweet and good and wonderful and God's plan. And this was traumatic and hard and scary and bad, right?
Oh, we have a question. I'm going to quickly get it. What is a good age to begin the discussion with our daughters? Public school has shown the video when in 6th grade, age 11. Is that too early or too late?
And no, I would honestly, like I said earlier, like, man, start when they're like potty training age, start naming the parts, call vaginas, vaginas, call penises, penises. Gosh, at 11, she's about ready to hit puberty, start her period, developing, her body's going to totally change. So that can be a scary age for girls. And I would say, boy, start having those conversations with her about, honey, your body's going to be changing a lot. You're going to develop breasts. You're going to, develop pubic hair. You're going to start getting this big estrogen wash. Boys will become more important. Mommies, you'll go, where'd my sweet little grade school daughter go? Where she thought boys were icky. And now she's 13, 14, and she's all about looking in the mirror and wondering if she's beautiful. And so, gosh, start having those conversations now. It's not too early at all. Become your child's sexual expert.
That is awesome. Nancy, I know you have somewhere to be at 11, and I just thank you so much for coming on with us and teaching this class on sexuality and love and sex and marriage. I think you're right. You do give it in such a kind, sweet way. I bet you were thinking to yourself, what the heck, why me? But I think you're perfect. You are perfectly placed in the position you are, and you bring such a kindness to it and a sweetness to it that is needed. You are truly a beautiful example of Titus 2, and I just want you to know that.
Thank you,
And I'm
Connie.
so glad. This book, y'all, please get this. And yeah, we might have to have something else, Nancy, for how to teach your children about healthy sexuality.
Yeah, that's fun. I love
That
that.
would be a good one. That would be a good one. Actually, Jesse and I are working on something right now. But anyway, so y'all know that this will be our mom class for this month. And I just thank you so much for coming to class, Nancy. You are just a pleasure. And we know that moms like us do things like this. Moms like us learn things because moms like us need to teach them not only to our children, but we need our own lives to be full. That's how we become thriving. We learn things so we can change things that were wrong and make them good and make them the way God intended them to be. Thank you so much for being on this Moms Like Us Academy class. And we will see you next time in the classroom. Bye-bye. Hi, I hope you liked this episode of the Moms Like Us show. And if you did, I hope that you'll share it. You'll share it with another mom friend because moms like us do things like this. I also hope that you will check out the Moms Like Us Academy, where we take ideas like we've been talking about on the show, but we go deeper. We just don't get inspired and think, ooh, that's a really good idea. I think I want to try that. We actually learn how to do these things and why we need to. And then you know what? You have Mona, the mom mentor, and other master moms that teach the master classes in there. They come alongside and we don't leave you alone. We help you implement and really truly change your mom life into the mom life you've always wanted to have, because motherhood isn't a natural talent. It's a skill, sweetie, and you can learn it. So go and check out the Moms Like Us Academy today and find me when you get there and say hi.